I'm Drew Stevenson, and this is a lecture about the case Environmental Defense Fund v. Thomas. This is actually a district court case from the District of Columbia from 1986 about executive orders and presidential oversight. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the OMB, or the Office of Management and Budget. So let's look at what happened in this case. So EDF is a public interest group that basically litigates for to protect the environment, and they challenged the EPA's delay in promulgating required pollution regulations under a new statute. Congress had passed RCRA, a pollution statute, and included some statutory deadlines for the EPA to promulgate specific regulations under the law. And the EPA had missed their statutory deadlines. Now, the Reagan era Office of Management and Budget had caused the delay, actually, by refusing to review the EPA's proposed regulations in time. And remember that the OMB is reviewing for cost-benefit analysis under Reagan's Executive Order 12291, which I discuss in a separate lecture. And so basically the OMB wasn't just disapproving it, they were sort of, ghosting the agency, so to speak, and not taking any action on it, and were thereby thwarting Congress's intentions because the EPA couldn't have the rule get published couldn't proceed with their notice and comment rulemaking without the OMB approving it. This is Lee Thomas, who was the EPA administrator at the time, and he became the named defendant in the case. EDF lists him as one of the defendants, even though the case is really focused on the OMB's obstruction of the EPA's efforts. He's sort of caught in the middle here. And the EPA was trying to promulgate the regs by the statutory deadline, as they had been told, and the OMB was, again, obstructing that. And the court here held here's the holding. The court required the EPA to promulgate the regulations by 1 year from the date they were proposed. And it held that the OMB could not use its regulatory review under Executive Order 12291 to delay promulgation of the regulations under the statute beyond the date of this new deadline. Now, even assuming the validity of the executive order, EDF v. Thomas highlights the potential for abuse in certain circumstances. So let's assume Executive Order 12291 is fine, and but the OMB could kind of intervene too much, or meddle too much, or block agencies from doing things that Congress really wants them to do. And we would like to presume that the president lacks authority to insist on lengthy OMB review. The OMB was probably doing this at the behest of the White House, beyond the mandatory time limit specified by statute. Now, note that going back to the case for a minute, the court was cautious about what remedy to apply here, right? Remember that the executive orders are typically not subject to judicial review. The executive order hadn't created a cause of action or any rights. And instead, this is being brought to challenge agency inaction or refusal to act on a congressional statute. So what it did, the court here, was it basically accepted the EPA's proposed new deadline and issued declaratory relief. The court probably wanted to preserve a presumption of agency good faith. Ordering the EPA to bypass further OMB review entirely would probably have been an excessive intrusion by the judiciary into executive branch administration. And that concludes our discussion of the Environmental Defense Fund v. Thomas.